The world of archaeology is abuzz with anticipation as news of a shocking discovery spreads like wildfire. Scientists are reeling from the sheer magnitude of what they've found, and the secrecy surrounding this unearthing only adds to the sense of suspense. What secrets will be revealed? What long-buried knowledge will we uncover? Let's take a look at it all. Mayan artifacts. Due to representations in popular culture, both positive and bad connotations are connected to the ancient Mayan people and their way of life. The Maya were already a highly developed civilization when Europeans and English settlers arrived in the Americas. They left behind some pretty fascinating and historically significant artifacts due to their advanced mathematical and written word capabilities, which surpassed even the most progressive nations of the period. The Mayan people, before they were colonized, created a great deal of infrastructure and artwork utilizing a wide range of materials and techniques. Many Mayan artifacts survived the collapse of their society and are now being unearthed by historians and archaeologists. Keeping this in mind, let's examine a few Mayan artifacts that have been in the news recently. All of the following are currently on display at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. The ancient Mayans were not shy about utilizing unusual materials in their artwork. Flint was used to fashioning the scepter's head on this Mayan artifact, suggesting its original owner held a position of authority. The blade features two figures, suggesting a monarch being supported by his subjects. Given its usefulness in starting fires, it's not hard to see why the ancient Mayans linked lightning strikes to the origin of flint. Given the nature of the material and the overall aesthetic of the piece, it is widely held that both figures represent the Mayan lightning god, Kawil. The sword would have been displayed at the top of the staff as a badge of authority. One of the lesser-known aspects of Mayan culture is how seriously they treated chocolate. Many people considered chocolate to be a divine gift, so much so that entire companies sprung up to make and sell it. This piece of Mayan pottery served as both a vessel for storing and frothing a favorite chocolate beverage. Alien holes that are perfectly aligned. A series of unexplained holes that are perfectly aligned have been discovered by explorers around 1.6 miles below the surface of the water. These holes were punched into the seafloor, but the explorers have no idea who or what produced them. The peculiar holes were discovered by the crew of the Okeanos Explorer vessel, which belonged to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, while they were investigating the Mid-Atlantic Ridge. The Mid-Atlantic Ridge is a mostly undiscovered portion of the seafloor that is a part of the world's biggest mountain range. The holes are aligned in a line and are spaced at intervals that are constant and repeatable. Additionally, they are surrounded by teeny tiny mounds of sediment. During a dive in 2004, two marine scientists working for the U.S. National Marine Fisheries Service discovered two unexplained hollows in the ocean floor. This is not the first time that holes have been found in the region. According to a post that the NOAA researchers made on Facebook, these holes have been reported from the region in the past, but their origin remains a mystery. Although they almost appear to have been made by humans, it appears from the little piles of sediment that surround the holes that they were excavated by something, the author writes. In 2004, scientists claimed that an organism living in or sifting through the sediment on the seafloor was responsible for creating the holes. However, no one has ever witnessed such organisms creating the holes, therefore their precise origins remain unknown. The public's conjecture under the NOAA's post's Facebook page was extremely diverse, ranging from ants, aliens, and even starfish doing cartwheels to fracture in the floor's surface caused by leaking gas, undersea human craft hunting for riches, and cracks in the floor caused by escaping gas. Hidden Japanese settlement. A few rusty cans and a saw blade were discovered in the woods of the North Shore Mountains of British Columbia in 2004, and this is when archaeology professor Robert Muckle was notified of the site. Even while he had an inkling that the location had housed a historic logging camp, he had no idea that he would spend the next 14 years uncovering evidence of a long-lost Japanese community that appears to have been abruptly abandoned. Since then, more than 1,000 artifacts have been excavated from the site by Muckle and his rotating teams of Capilano University archaeological students, as reported by Brent Richter of the North Shore News. Japanese pottery makes up a large portion of the antiques, along with rice bowls, sake bottles, teapots, pocket clocks, buttons, and dozens upon dozens of other little items. Muckle told Smithsonian that they found the locations of 14 small houses, a garden, a wood-lined water reservoir, and what may have been a shrine. They also found the ruins of a bathhouse, a crucial part of Japanese society. The community can be found 12 miles to the northeast of Vancouver in what is now called the Lower Seymour Conservation Reserve. Muckle has found two other locations in the area that have been linked to Japanese settlers. The first site appears to have been part of a multi-ethnic logging camp, while the second location was a Japanese logging camp that was occupied for a number of years beginning around 1920. However, the third location piques his interest the most because it appears to have evolved from a logging camp into a bustling village. When Muckle informs Richter that there was very likely a small community of Japanese who were living here on the margins of an urban area, he means that there was likely a small group of Japanese people who lived there. They may have been hiding out here, I suppose. It is possible that the area was formerly home to a forestry hamlet, as a Japanese businessman called Ikichi Kagetsu obtained logging rights to a plot of land nearby in around 1918. Muckle believes that the villagers continued to remain in the area beyond 1924, when the last of the trees would have been cut down. Even with all the bigotry in Vancouver in the 1920s and 30s, the impression that I get, generally speaking, is it would have been a nice life for these people, he says Richter. British Columbia was a popular destination for the first wave of Japanese immigrants who arrived in Canada in 1877. At first, they were treated with hostility and discrimination. According to the Canadian Encyclopedia, lawmakers in the province banned Asian people from voting, entering the civil service, and working in a number of other professions, including law. After the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor in December 1941, anti-Japanese sentiments reached a boiling point during World War II. Canadian soldiers stationed in Hong Kong suffered heavy casualties when Japanese forces stormed the city a few days later. The Canadian government began seizing Japanese-owned fishing vessels, closing Japanese-language media and institutions, and detaining individuals on suspicion of being Japanese agents. By the winter of 1942, a 100-mile stretch of the Pacific coast had been designated a protected area, and residents of Japanese ancestry were ordered to depart with nothing but the clothes on their backs. Men were forced to join road gangs, while women and children were sent to remote host communities in the backwoods of British Columbia. More than 90% of Japanese Canadians, including many natural-born citizens, were forced to leave their homes during the war, according to the Canadian Encyclopedia. Muckle has not discovered any artifacts from the North Shore camp that can be confidently dated to a time period after 1920, and there are no surviving records of the people who lived there. He told Smithsonian that he believes the villagers lived in their wooded enclave until 1942, when they were incarcerated or sent to road camps, based on the haste with which they left behind prized possessions. Witch bottle. Demolition workers in Watford, England, found a bottle containing fishhooks, human teeth, shards of glass, and an unexplained liquid while dismantling the chimney of a former inn and tavern. The 19th century bottle was said to be a witch bottle, a talisman set on purpose to protect a building from the practice of witchcraft, BBC News. There have been over 100 bottles like the recently found one retrieved from British buildings, graveyards, and rivers. The majority of these items date back to the 1600s, when a widespread witch panic swept across continental Europe. The contents of witch bottles often contain needles, nails, thorns, urine, clippings from fingernails, and hair. The building in Watford, currently a private residence, but previously the Star and Garter Inn, is most famous for being the birthplace of Angeline Tubbs, who became known as the Witch of Saratoga, according to BBC News. Tubbs, who was born in 1761, moved to the U.S. when she was a teenager. She eventually resided in Saratoga Springs, New York, where she made a living as a fortune teller. The torpedo-shaped glass bottles that were discovered in Watford were not originally produced until the 1830s, so it's unlikely that they had any connection to Tubbs. Nonetheless, the witch's bottle's presence does indicate that the building's occupants have been more steadfast in their anti-witchcraft beliefs than the general public. It's certainly later than most witch bottles, so sadly not contemporary with Angeline Tubbs. Historian and folklorist Sari Holbrook from the University of Hertfordshire told BBC News, but still a fascinating find. The present owner of the house has no intention of putting the bottle on display. Someone else, it seems, will probably hide it away again for someone to find in another 100 years or so. When used, what effect did witch bottles have? Allison C. Meyer of JSTOR Daily reports that various substances, most frequently urine and bent pins, were used to fill the vessels. It was thought that witches in transit from the other world would be drawn in by the urine and imprisoned on the pins inside the container. People who were afraid of witchcraft would hide the bottles under their hearths or near their chimneys, because as archaeologist Christopher C. Fennell wrote in a 2000 study, they believed witches gained access to homes through deviant paths such as the chimney stack. There's more to witch bottles than meets the eye. The Museum of London Archaeology has a 3-year project called Witch Bottles Concealed and Revealed, in which researchers, including Holbrook, examine artifacts from public and private collections. The group hopes to uncover how and where this practice first emerged, as well as how it connects to ideas about magic and early modern medicine. Jeff Manaw of The New Yorker notes that Mola ceramics specialist Nigel Jeffries has become convinced by the project's evidence that witch bottles were originally intended for medicinal reasons. Jeffries tells Mana that the jars could have been believed to contain curatives that could bring a home's residents longevity and health. In the Hudson Valley, builders and archaeologists have discovered witch bottles, eerie symbols, and other forms of magical protection dating back to the 1600s, making it the oldest known example of witchcraft hysteria in the US outside of Salem. That's all for the video today. We will be right back with more such videos. Don't forget to give this one a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching.